Howdy everyone. So, how about Dazed and Confused? The 1993 Richard Linklater film is an absolute classic as far as both the 90s independent film scene and coming-of-age genre are concerned. It features an absolutely stupid number of beloved actors from the decade and beyond, a soundtrack that's still a summertime staple, and made good on the promise exhibited by Linklater in his 1990 feature debut Slacker 2 while we're at it. Nothing quite beats the camaraderie shared by its cast on screen, its gentle existential themes, and the way that the film manages to make every second of its plot feel simultaneously lived in and larger than life. The movie is one of my favorite summer films, as I've often started or ended the summer for the past decade with a screening of it. And because of that, and the fact that Richard Linklater in general is one of my favorite directors, I've obviously wanted to make a video about it for a long time now. But there's a problem with that. You see, I don't really have anything I can say about it other than the fact that it's a very good movie, because everything else has already been covered. Like, the only thing I can offer to any discussion of it is that I wish there were more movies like it. Which got me thinking about the various elements I enjoy in this movie and how I may be able to find them in other films too. So today, I'll be taking a break from my usual pattern of alternating video essays where I analyze films and podcast episodes to try something new. I'm gonna sit down and fire off 5 movies, as well as a bunch of honorable mentions that I think fans of this classic 90s coming-of-age flick will enjoy. The idea here is to hone in on individual qualities about Dazed and Confused that I adore, and to try and find other films that scratch that same itch. And if you yourself have a personal favorite you want to name in the comments, I urge you to do just that, as well as tell me what you think of any of these movies if you've seen them before. Kicking things off, we've got the most obvious movie in the bunch, 2016's Everybody Wants Some. If any of the choices for this video was gonna be a complete no-brainer, it's gotta be this one and the next film I'll be talking about. Everybody Wants Some was Richard Linklater's follow-up to Boyhood and is, in the director's words, a spiritual follow-up to Dazed and Confused. In fact, you could basically call this movie Dazed and Confused 2 Electric Confused-aloo. Whereas Dazed primarily followed a bunch of incoming seniors on the last day of school, Everybody Wants Some is about a men's college baseball team. The story is framed around an incoming freshman named Jake in the week leading up to his first semester, and follows him getting to know his team, going out to party, and his impending college experience. So it's basically the other side of the coin that was Dazed and Confused, down to it also being a period piece that was set in 1980 as opposed to 1976 like its forebear was. Because of this, the film has the same general vibe and tone as Dazed and Confused. Similarly features some faces you might recognize from before they blew up, like, I don't know, frickin' Glenn Powell, and was undersung enough when it released to fly under enough people's radars to feel like a worthy recommendation. It's kinda weird how many people haven't seen this movie. It came out my senior year in college, and despite the fact that I was studying media production and film in an environment surrounded by folks who liked Boyhood and Dazed, never heard about it once. Which is a total shame because it might even beat Dazed and Confused at a few of its own tricks. For example, there's a scene where the characters are jamming out to Rapper's Delight in their car, and I'd argue that it's more fun than its Dazed and Confused counterpart when they're driving around to Lowrider.
I got a color TV so I can see the Knicks playing basketball.
Likewise, awesome needle drops like the Hurricane one in Dazed are done like 2 or 3 times in this movie to great effect, and they also never get old. It's worth mentioning that this film is an interesting insight into Linklater's formative years too, as while he was promoting the movie, he basically revealed that this is what he was like at this age.
You know, it's a different part of me. You know, it's like, that was Eller's the sensitive, kind of thoughtful artist guy, but this is kind of who I really, I was closer to Jake.
Right,
the carousing, overconfident, athlete dude.
More than anything, Everybody Wants Some is a blast. It's self-indulgently into itself and the bravado it positions, but in a way that's a total delight. I feel like it never gets to be too much because it's well balanced against a liberal gloss of Linklater's more wallflowery qualities. If you liked the football players in Dazed, imagine them as being a bit more meat-headed and you basically have this movie.
Well, look at this lovely bunch of ladies. Let's say hi.
I think we should.
Personally, I found it to be a great trip down memory lane because of how universal its characters are. They're the type of people we've all met before, and they're definitively Linklater characters.
We look forward to seeing all of you there. All of you.
Coming up next, we've got another obvious choice: American Graffiti. At the risk of pissing off any Star Wars fans in the audience, I'm just gonna come out and say that I think this is George Lucas's best film, and that there's no denying the influence it had on Dazed and Confused either. In fact, you could argue that Dazed is a bit of a ripoff of it. The story goes as follows. It's the last day of summer in 1962, and we're invited to join a, you guessed it, absolutely stacked cast from just before they hit it big for their last night together before college. You've got Ron Howard and Cindy Williams as a bickering couple, Richard Dreyfuss as an unlucky in love Joe Schmo, and a pre-Han Solo Harrison Ford as a drag racing badass. Similar to Dazed, we also have a character's younger sibling crashing the fun too, as well as a classic radio-friendly soundtrack to enjoy. And not just any classic radio-friendly soundtrack too, it's actually one of the first movies to make use of that type of soundtrack. If you haven't seen this one and loved the nostalgic depiction of the 70s from Dazed, you'll feel right at home here. Everything about this film has a special kind of reverence for the era that's hard not to smile at.
You ain't got no emotions? We are going to remember all of the good times.
The film is based on Lucas's upbringing in Modesto, California, and he approached directing it a lot like he was working on a documentary. There's a lot of shallow focused shots in this movie that make parts of it feel a little drunk and like it's teetering on collapse. It sucks you into the events on screen and makes it easy to imagine you're there going through everything the characters are. As if that weren't enough, you can even see shades of Star Wars start to come together in this movie. Aside from the obvious Harrison Ford connection, American Graffiti has this chipper, nostalgic tone that feels in step with the generally upbeat and adventurous A New Hope. To crib an idea expressed in that fluffy Empire Dream Star Wars doc from the 2000s, it's an example of a movie just wanting to have fun.
I had gone from being extremely experimental and hard-edged, and then really taking up a challenge that Francis gave me. I bet you can't do just a silly comedy, kind of warm and fuzzy comedy. So, okay, I'll try that.
Additionally, and this will just be a bonus movie rec for the hell of it, it even got a sequel in 1979 that I feel is criminally underrated. That movie's called More American Graffiti, and while it's a little disjointed thanks to being spread across 3 different New Year's Eves, is a great take on doing a sequel to a coming-of-age story. Rather than force its main characters to come together for some contrived reason, it only kind of allows their stories to intersect and instead makes a point of showing how their lives had gone after the first movie ended.
Whatever you say. Hey, it's the little twerp.
Don't little twerp me, John. I've grown.
A little bit.
It builds off the loose storytelling in the original by giving us 3 short stories to dip in and out of, and it ends up covering everything about the 60s that the original didn't in the process. If the first movie covered mainstream 60s culture at the start of the decade, this one veers closer to Dazed territory by depicting how counterculture seeped into things just a few years later. And here's some fun trivia for you. It's also the closest we'll ever get to seeing how George Lucas's version of Apocalypse Now would have gone since he ghost-directed some of the Vietnam War scenes in it. It doesn't quite live up to the original at the end of the day, but if you've seen American Graffiti before or want to see more of it after you check it out, More American Graffiti is exactly what the name implies it is.
Baby love, my baby love, I need you, oh how I need you, but all you do is treat me bad.
Okay, so my third recommendation is actually a movie that some of you may still be able to catch in theaters. If not though, it'll probably be on digital by September anyway, and on a streaming service not too long after that. Anyway, the name of the movie is Didi, and it's a great coming-of-age flick from the point of view of an Asian American teen in California. Other than the fact that I just wanted to gush about this movie for a minute since I think it's a monumental directorial debut, it's also a great compliment to Mitch Kramer's arc in Dazed and Confused. Like Mitch, the film's protagonist Wang is about to become a high school freshman, and is trying to navigate what that means for him. He's reconsidering his friendships. He's developing feelings for girls for the first time, and he's experimenting with drugs and alcohol. But Didi lenses all of this through the experience of being an Asian American in the early 2000s. There's social media and skater culture thrown into the mix, and it's all done so frickin' well. You really get a sense for the feelings of confusion and aimlessness that comes with being a kid that isn't particularly gifted at anything, and how it feels to be at the crossroads of becoming a young adult.
So, who are those new people you've been hanging out with?
Friends.
Promise me you won't do anything stupid.
Wang is too young to do anything, but he's also too old to do nothing, and that makes for a great hour-and-a-half watch. Even better, the movie still manages to work if you aren't familiar with culture in the aughts. In part because Wang is a first-generation American and a preteen/early teen on top of that, he lacks a tight grip on many American hallmarks since his parents may not have been familiar with them for themselves. For example, he hasn't seen movies like Star Wars or E.T. before, nor is he familiar with Facebook at first. Things that we are all definitely familiar with now, but might shock us to find that he isn't.
Let's see who can do a better E.T. impression.
Okay.
So, not knowing about culture back then and how kids acted around each other might exaggerate the feelings of otherness that he feels and strengthen the drive of the movie because you'll be about as lost as he is. I had a moment when I was watching this movie in theaters where I basically had to take a step back because I realized how good a job it was doing in capturing what it felt like to be Wang's age. I was the same age as the character was when this movie takes place, and I lost count of the number of times that I basically did the Leo pointing meme at the screen. Pretending to be into Paramore to get your crush's attention?
Here I come.
Running home to scrub your YouTube channel of embarrassing home videos so that people you want to be friends with don't think you're lame?
Here I come.
Feeling vaguely embarrassed by your heritage and not knowing how to interact with it because you're a dumb kid who doesn't know better?
Here I come.
It was wild seeing a movie like this due to my proximity to the time it takes place in. And I can only imagine that's what it feels like for people who were teens in the 70s to watch Dazed and Confused. So if you were a teenager in the late 2000s, or you have a kid or sibling who was, consider checking this one out sometime. It may not be a perfect fit as far as tone goes with Dazed and Confused, but that shouldn't stop you from being able to enjoy it. Additionally, it does have its moments of Linklaterness to it too, specifically in the scenes when Wang is talking to his mother, which I felt almost worked as a compliment to Mason's relationship with his parents in Boyhood.
Yo, Wang, don't even trip. You got strong ass teeth, you're handsome. That's why Manny likes you, baby.
The fourth movie I want to recommend today is Noah Baumbach's 1995 debut feature, Kicking and Screaming, not to be mistaken with the Will Ferrell soccer movie from 10 years later.
Why don't you go to hell? No, you go to hell. While you're there, why don't you grab me a juice box?
Baumbach's film is a charming indie coming-of-age story about a group of guys that are stumbling through life after graduating from college. They're aimless, they're a little repressed, and they're the perfect vessel for the earliest version of Baumbach's deadpan existential dialogue that he would go on to refine over the years.
Get down.
Why?
Get down.
It's a cookie man.
The guy who goes door to door selling cookies, I saw him earlier in the neighborhood. He is so hard to say no to. Just stay down.
It's a little Woody Allen in how learnt and casually philosophical it can be, and it's a little American Graffiti in how juvenile it feels too. One of the most prominent similarities this has to Dazed and Confused is in how unabashedly bro-like the characters are in this, as well as how listlessly wordy the dialogue is. It also features Baumbach himself in a cameo where he takes a moment to ask the real questions.
What would you rather do? Fuck a cow or a turkey?
Wild or farm raised?
I no idea. Just answer the question.
And like, that in itself is not entirely dissimilar from some of the dialogue in Dazed now that I think about it.
I'm getting it on, you know, with what had this perfect female body. But
Come on, man, you can't give a build-up like that, you know, and not deliver, right? I mean, come on, a perfect female body, it's not a bad start.
But the head of Abraham Lincoln. I mean, the hat and the beard.
Some might find this one a bit self-indulgent and lacking in the punch of other Baumbachs, but I think a lot of that could be excused with it being his first crack at a feature. And if you're a fan of the non-football playing seniors from Dazed, there's a good chance you'll get a kick out of the ensemble of this film too.
Cookie Man.
Sure, Francis Ha may have covered similar themes of aimlessness in a clearer, more emotionally resonant way, but there's something frank and honest to how Baumbach approaches the material here. He was like 25 or 26 when this got made, so the fact that it feels as mature as it does is a minor miracle. Plus, its rougher edges are peak 90s independent cinema and embody the movement that Linklater helped define with his debut Slacker. Speaking of which, Kicking and Screaming may not be visually similar to Dazed itself, but parts of it do feel like a more focused version of the aforementioned Slacker, as well as Linklater's often undersung 1996 film Suburbia. Two movies, mind you, that likely would have made this list if I hadn't already recommended Everybody Wants Some. Slacker was once called a 14-course meal composed entirely of desserts by Vincent Canby in the New York Times, and I feel like the same could be said about this movie on some level. Oh, and another thing I couldn't help but notice in relation to Dazed is how one of its characters ends up crushing on a teenager.
You know, tomorrow's my birthday. I'm gonna be 17 tomorrow, and I'd like that.
17. Wow. So now you can read 17 magazine and finally get all the references.
There's a certain ick to it that gets glossed over more than I would have liked for it to, but it's undeniably reminiscent of Matthew McConaughey's Wooderson from Dazed.
That's what I love about these high school girls, man. I get older, they stay the same age.
Yes, they do.
Yes, they do.
Now that I think about it, that was also a plot point in American Graffiti.
Fine, kid.
Gee, thanks!
Huh. Weird.
Uh-huh, see, you make fun of me, but there is something going on here.
Before we go on, I want to take a moment to list some honorable mentions, along with a few lines about why I think they'd make great watches. The first one I want to shout out is Booksmart, another newer entry in the coming-of-age genre. The movie was Olivia Wilde's directorial debut and follows a pair of best friends as they attempt to make the best of their high school graduation by cutting loose at a party. It's more of an update on the frat-adjacent party comedy than it is a Linklater homage, but I felt that the inclusion of a huge party scene and some of its themes pull it close enough to be worth mentioning. Following up on that, we have Adventureland, which is one of my favorite coming-of-age movies in general. It's got a great cast, including Ryan Reynolds in a surprisingly off-type role, one of my favorite 80s soundtracks for a movie that wasn't made in the 80s, and even features a score by Hoboken's own Yo La Tengo. I love this band and score so much, so this one, a lot of it being here has to do with that. And while we have New Jersey on the mind, our next honorable mention goes to Kevin Smith's Mallrats. I'm gonna keep this one especially short since I don't even think it's that good of a movie, but I did pick it because Smith was directly influenced by Linklater when he made Clerks, and because Mallrats and Dazed feature a pre-Good Will Hunting Ben Affleck. The next one here is a bit of a curveball, I think. Ocean's 12. I know how crazy that sounds on paper, but hear me out. One of the reasons I absolutely adore this movie is because it borders on being a hangout film where George and his goons McClune are stuck in an endless loop of trying to figure out what to do next. And something about the way they go through that just reminds me of the characters in Dazed and Confused. They're both movies that are centered around a group of guys who live and die by their banter and the chemistry of their ensemble, so I don't know, I just think it works. As for my last honorable mention, I'm gonna go super commercial again and pick a movie that doesn't sound like it should be a good fit, but might be. Ferris Bueller's Day Off. While the movie is a much more conventional tale of teenage antics than Dazed is, it's another coming-of-age flick that's heavy on the camaraderie of friends and the rejection of authority, as well as features a soundtrack of wall-to-wall bangers. Going from the seemingly formless style of Dazed and Confused to the classic John Hughes take on being a teenager makes for a great double feature. I once said something to the effect of John Hughes movies capturing what being a teenager feels like as opposed to what it actually is like, and because of that, I think pairing these two films together is a smart move.
Oh, well, he's very popular, Ed. The sportos, the motorheads, geeks, sluts, bloods, wastoids, dweebies, dickheads. They all adore him. They think he's a righteous dude.
Alright, so the last movie I'll be recommending fans of Dazed and Confused is 1983's The Big Chill. The film is a comedy drama that was directed by Lawrence Kasdan, writer of The Empire Strikes Back for any Star Wars guys that stuck around after my American Graffiti comment, and was written by him with Barbara Benedek.
It's a fucking bat up there, and I think it touched my hair. Oh, yeah. Oh, God, I hate them. They're like rats with wings.
No, pigeons are rats with wings.
No, they're harmless. They eat mosquitoes. I'm gonna go wash my hair and puke.
Puke first, of course. Stand aside. Yes, I'll cover your rear.
It's about a group of people who went to college in the 60s coming together for a friend's funeral. Over the course of the film, they catch up and we learn about the ways their lives have gone since they were in school together. And to no one's surprise, various secrets amongst them begin to come out as they reflect on their relationships. It's basically The Breakfast Club, but everyone's an adult. Which is exactly why I think this makes for a good recommendation. It's sort of like why I thought Ferris Bueller worked, only instead of it providing a more Hollywood take on being a teenager, it's because it's a more formal spin on similar themes getting applied to adults. Not to mention, I think there's something to be said about this being the only movie on today's list about full-on adults too. Not young adults like in Kicking and Screaming or in More American Graffiti, proper, look at that glorious mustache adults that went to college in the 60s.
Amazing tradition. They throw a great party for you on the one day they know you can't come.
Thematically, I think there's something to be said about the way this movie tackles how these characters hold on to the past. You really get a sense for how their deceased friend was the connecting fiber of their friend group, and how, in his absence, they aren't quite sure what they're doing together. They clearly have a past that they could look back on fondly, but there's no telling if it's enough for them to want to stay in each other's lives.
I think we're all trying to avoid dealing with Alex. You know, every time it comes up, somebody changes the subject.
Hey, it's a dead subject.
I get real tired of these jokes. Oh, what are we afraid of here? To show our emotions, huh? Or we just mad at him for leaving us with no explanation?
I could say something really funny about that.
Not to mention, it's also a sharply written and well-acted film that probably had an influence on Linklater and some of the other filmmakers I've mentioned here today, like Noah Baumbach. In fact, I'm seemingly not the only one to think this either, as doing a tiny bit of research into this film led me to a review on mediocremovie.club where John Kissel said, quote, "The Big Chill's universal qualities mostly salvage what I wanted out of it, which was a Linklater-esque discussion of aging and values and what living through a shared, momentous time meant for the characters 15 years on, if it meant anything at all." And he's totally right. I think the movie feels like the sort of conversation Linklater may have had with his friends during a high school reunion or something. One that could have served as the partial inspiration for Dazed and Confused. As if any of that wasn't enough for you, it also has Jeff Goldblum, so that's cool. The Big Chill really nails the hangout aspect of Dazed and Confused in a way that I found enjoyable. It puts character work first, and if you're into movies like that, I think you'll get something out of it. It might lean a bit more on the American Graffiti side of things since they went to college in the 60s, but the development of these characters from students to adults still makes for a compelling Linklater-y affair.
Alex and I made love the night before he died. It was fantastic.
It went out with a bang, not a whimper.
Anyway, that brings us to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and that if you did, you consider checking any of these movies out and coming back to tell me what you thought of it. You're also free to subscribe to the channel, share this with a friend, or subscribe to my Patreon or get a channel membership if you want to go the extra mile in showing your support. I also invite you to check out my two podcasts, Media Obscura and Glaring Admissions. They're both dedicated to celebrating old and obscure or iconic seminal films respectively, and are available right here on this channel as full videos or on their shared RSS feed. So yeah, bye.
It's like the every other decade theory, you know? The 50s were boring, the 60s rocked, the 70s, oh my God, they obviously suck, right? Come on. Maybe the 80s will be radical, you know? I figure we'll be in our 20s and hey, it can't get any worse.